gotta go big or go home. We're down to the gold. Never been a better time to put it all on the line. Ooh, yeah. Time to put it all on the line.
All right, and welcome back. This is episode 2 of the RumberPod. I am your host, Ryan, with my co-host, Spencer, here. As you can see, I got the light set up. I got the camera set up. We back. We sew up.
Looking
First
good,
episode
baby.
was not... We're looking good. We're looking a lot
nice.
better, at least. But how you doing, Spencer? How's your Sunday going?
Things are great. Got to watch a Game 1 win for my Golden Knights yesterday, I believe. Was it yesterday? I don't know. The time's flying. But regardless, great win. Getting a little more into hockey right now, but I always got my mind on ball primarily. You know that.
Yeah, bro. Saw the Stars did end up beating the Kraken, which I don't watch a lot of hockey, but I did watch the Avs-Kraken series, and that was good. I thought even though the Avs, I thought were going to end up winning, even if they did win, it was not going to be good news considering that series went so long, but Stars did prevail, and hopefully the Knights can take care of business in Dallas.
Yeah, Stars are a bit of a thorn in the side of these newer teams because they got the Knights not too long ago as well in the playoffs, and that was tough. But Knights will always be my first hockey love, but I definitely enjoyed watching the Kraken this year, and I don't take hockey nearly as serious as my football fandom and stuff, so it's like I
was
have
gonna
two
say
teams.
it's May, bro. We got
No big
OTAs
deal.
soon.
Yeah, no, we got to get focused, and I can never truly take my mind off of football completely at any point. Like, I'm always just hawk watching like OTA updates and things like that. Like I was all over rookie minicamp, like freaking out, like Devin Witherspoon and JSN weren't contributing in the minicamp because they're recovering from hammies, and I'm just like, oh man, oh no. It's like, bro, it's rookie minicamp. We have so much more time. But
Indeed.
that being said, I mean, we're going to get into offseason breakdowns once more here. And a lot of people would say it's a bit early. But, I mean, at this point, we've seen a majority of the moves these teams are going to make as far as, like, high-impact additions. So, we were going to kick off with Houston. But I'll let you start us off here. What stood out to you with the Houston Texans offseason this year?
Yeah, one thing I really liked is the additions that they made in the offseason, and we'll get into this a little bit later, but I think that some of the other teams were not nearly as aggressive as the Texans were in free agency. I really, really like the additions of Schultz and Jimmy Ward, Robert Woods, and you and I might disagree on this, but I'm a big Sheldon Rankins truther. I thought that was a great addition to the D-line, and I really liked what they did in the free agency market as well as building in the draft. They really added a lot of pieces for D'Amico Ryans to work with. That's one thing that stood out to me just kind of in prepping for this show was that I was pretty impressed by the additions that they were able to make in the offseason.
Yeah, this is a fun division to talk about. I've been looking forward to this episode just because there's so much newness to kind of go over here. We're talking about D'Amico Ryans' first year as a head coach. This is the same division with Shane Steichen coming in for the Colts. So there's a lot of fun things to talk about. Young players as well getting added. I think you and I will defer just a tad on the free agent market, only because I don't know if you were fully aware, but a lot of these deals are one-year deals, which I find I find frankly a little troubling just because I see the draft class as sort of the culture building, like the setting the foundation, so to speak. But like guys like Dalton Schultz, I love the addition, but why not lock him up for longer, right? I mean, they're not working with a lot on this tight end roster. Brevin Jordan wasn't a bad selection for Miami, but hasn't been done a whole lot since entering the league. And then just kind of touching back on, you said Robert Woods. Me personally, I'm getting to be pretty low on Robert Woods. Personally, I mean,
He's aging, first of all.
yes, he wasn't looking like himself at all, and I know he was still recovering last year with Tennessee, and frankly not working with a whole lot else in the wide receiving core. But when you look at this receiver core, between Collins and Mechie and Dell, there's a lot, and even Hutchinson as the late selection. Like there's a lot of decent upside within the roster, but I don't see any standout guys who are just going to, what you're getting from those guys. And like Robert Woods, I feel
100%.
like is a lot better as a complementary piece at this juncture in his career. But at the end of the day, I don't want to be too low. I do believe in Mechie. I like Mechie a lot. I love his story. Obviously, everyone knows kind of his recovery from the cancer he was dealing with. And then Nico Collins, actually, I feel has been pretty underrated. Maybe a good third receiver. I mean, he's going to push for outside snaps, but yeah, I mean, pretty physical at the catch point. Good kind of jump ball guy. He's getting better every year that I see him. He's constantly a fantasy sleeper that I'm keeping my eye on, but with Davis Mills at quarterback in the past, it hasn't been overly tantalizing your returns for this offense. So I think that's the obvious kind of first talking point for us is like, what do we need to expect from CJ Stroud coming in year one? What do you think?
I think this is a really important point to make because I might even go a bit farther than you have here. I think that this wide receiver room is in dire straits, just as far as what you're wanting to put around CJ Stroud talent-wise to be able to succeed. I mean, Robert Woods, one day at one time was, giving you decent production. But Nico Collins and Mechie, even though he's been out due to his illness, I just don't see a lot of upside here in this wide receiver room for CJ Stroud. And particularly, I want to make this point in context with what he was working with at Ohio State, where he had 5 potential first-round draft picks at the wide receiver position. And coming into this wide receiver room, I think is going to be a pretty big adjustment, especially considering that Stroud is probably going to be the week 1 starter. So I think that it's going to be a pretty big adjustment, just speed-wise getting into the NFL. And I think that there's going to be a really strong talent discrepancy that is in that wide receiver room that he's going to have to figure out how to deal with.
I mean, even bigger talent discrepancy to bring up is the fact that, C.J. Stroud spent his entire college career throwing to some combination of Marvin Harrison, Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, and then JSN as well. So it's just it's going from riches to rags, so to speak here. And I don't want to be too hard on our Texans fans in this regard because I actually, looking at their class, just real quickly, I wanted to touch on their draft class. They actually knocked it out of the park as far as I'm concerned here. It was pretty much rounds 1 through 6. I can get behind almost all of these players. Specifically, though, tying into the wide receiver core, Tank Dell, human juke stick. I mean, he's going to be a Madden favorite, this guy. He's got every kind of combination you can ask for. I mean, you watch his film, he's hitting a spin move, 2 different jukes, and then he's off to the races on these guys. To be fair, he played for Houston, but it's a great story, the hometown kid. The only concerns with Dell are his size, of course. But if they can get some kind of step up in production for their outside receivers, I think Dell can be very dangerous from the slot, and I think he is going to be open often for Stroud, be a bit of a security blanket for him, because we know what Stroud does best is he's going to get the ball out accurately on those dump-offs, and at the end of the day, I think that's the most likely outcome with this first year of offense. I mean, you're going to see D'Amico Ryans kind of try to implement a Niners-style passing game, a lot of free looks for the quarterback, a lot of free completions. And based on their personnel, I mean, Mechie, Dell, these guys are burners. I think that's a great foundation to come in with Stroud. Get him some easy looks, get him maybe some almost free explosive plays just based on the way they're going to scheme up these guys. So that's fun. That's really fun.
Agreed. Yeah. And on the Tank Dell point, I completely agree. He is going to, like, just his footwork and the way that he's got really polished route running, and he obviously is a big yak threat. It's just, I really, really am concerned of durability issues at his size. He is literally my size. I am not a big guy in the regular world. I am not a big guy, especially in the NFL world. He is my height and my weight.
Right.
And I would never make it in the NFL. I don't care if I put him. There's been talks that he's going to put on some weight. They were trying to get him to 170 or 175, which is certainly better. But even if you put on 10 or 15 pounds, you're still in the bottom first percentile for your height and weight in the NFL. I think certainly he has the skill set to succeed. I just don't know how many times, especially in that kind of spread offense that the Niners like to run, if they're just trying to dump it off to him, get him out in space, let him do what he needs to do. If he takes a few licks, I don't know how he's making it through 17 weeks. There's so much faster. There's so much bigger than the guys that he's used to. If he can stay healthy, I am fully on the Tank Dell train, and I know that Houston fans are really excited. And the other thing, getting back to this draft class, I like Xavier Hutchinson in the 6th as well. I think he's got a big frame. He's a good guy, can catch contested passes. I think these are two young wide receivers to be really excited about. It's just with Tank Dell, you've got the durability issues, but I think if Hutchinson can prove that he can contribute in special teams and get on the field and get some reps, I think that he could potentially be another guy for Stroud just as a safety valve, especially in an offense where we've seen people with similar frames like Deebo Samuel have a lot of success with the 49ers. I think that those two are very exciting additions. I just really am concerned about durability issues.
I like Hutchinson as well. He's going to be rotational for them at best early on, but I think he does have some good upside there. The other thing to consider, I think, transition just a little into the line play for Houston. This is going to kind of be make or break because, as we know, Stroud's going to need to be spreading the ball out, just making the right reads year one. And they're going to have a reasonable amount of success doing that, I would imagine. I mean, Dameon Pierce is a legit threat. And considering what Dameon Pierce was able to do just with the weapons that or the lack thereof weapons they had with last season, I think just any level of support they get from some combination of this wide receiving core with Dalton Schultz added in alongside Brevin Jordan, you would think they're going to get some increased production here. But it's going to come down to, is Stroud going to have enough time to make these reads? Because a large portion of what the Niners offense is predicated upon is a clean pocket so that the quarterback can make these decisions. Yes, they like to get guys out in space quickly, quick, snappy little short passes to get space to run for free, some of these guys. But at the end of the day, you're in the NFL now, you're going to have to push the ball downfield, and you have the weapons to do so. It clearly, based on the wide receiving core, they're looking to attack downfield with these types of weapons. So, I mean, getting into the line, Kenyon Green was a guy I liked coming out. Has been, decent, passable as he entered. Obviously, Laramie Tunsil is a staple on this line.
Yep.
But getting back into the draft class, I thought the selection of Juice Scruggs was pretty good. A bit of a reach in my mind. Maybe a little early for him, considering the other centers that were available at the time. Oluwatimi, for one, Michigan. There were a few others on the board, but Scruggs is still a good passable center, a good addition for them. I mean, they need all the O-line help they can get on the interior specifically. And on top of that, they were able to swing a trade for Shaq Mason, which is really good. I know Shaq Mason's getting near the end of his career, but that has to be the second best O-lineman on this team now, off from day one.
Agreed.
And
yeah.
I'm a Titus Howard believer. I mean, I know he had a rough start early on, but Shaq Mason's a legit guy. So where are you at? Where do you land with this O-line?
Yeah, I mean, certainly they're able to get the job done. I think that they have a good O-line. First of all, I do want to say that I think the way that was illustrated was last year with Pierce's breakout early in the season. Anybody that can have a rookie running back come in and put up those kind of numbers and have really good production, you're obviously doing something right on the O-line. You're winning in the trenches, which I think, especially just moving forward for Stroud and for Pierce is going to be really, really important. Especially considering that Stroud had such good O-line play at Ohio State, and that's where we saw all of his film. That's where we saw him be his best. So I think that's going to be a really important component. But I think as far as O-line situations going into the NFL where you're getting drafted, if you're expected to start week 1, I think you have to be happy with this. There are certainly a lot worse situations that you could find yourself in, and I think that they're certainly going to be they're going to be decent. I do like the addition, like you said, of Shaq Mason. I think that's really going to shore up the guard position. And I also like the Scruggs pick, even though it maybe was a bit of a reach, talent wise. I do like that they got some depth. Excuse me. Especially since Quessenberry was questionable in moments last season. But overall, yeah, I think it's a pretty decent O-line for CJ Stroud to come in and have success, just based on the success we saw with Davis Mills and Damian Pierce last season.
Mm-hmm. And I think an overarching point I want to make about the Texans offseason, because there's been a lot of talk about feeling that maybe it was a bit short-sighted to get to number 3 and give up the assets they gave up. It's understandable. I feel oftentimes the draft community gets a little zeroed in on asset accruement, so to speak. And I mean, we're talking about a Texans roster that had accrued an absolute treasure trove of assets. So the way I view this offseason, specifically the Stroud selection and then moving up to secure Anderson, this feels very much like a culture setting type of draft class for DeMeco Ryans. DeMeco Ryans wants to come in, make his style of play known, make it known to the players what the expectations are. And from everything we're hearing out of the draft cycle with Will Anderson, I mean, he's a born leader. Nick Saban told reporters that he felt that this kid, the ceiling was unnameable, so to speak. It was just, he can be as good as he wants to be, a lot of people feel. And the other thing is that Saban felt that he set the standard for Bama all these years in many ways. He was the guy that everyone looked to. They modeled their own work ethic after him. And just the kind of guy that you want as, if you're going to give up all of those assets to go and secure a defensive star, then a guy like Anderson is who you want, because the rest of this defensive roster, a young one, with some veteran inclusions now, but specifically in the secondary, all these guys, they can really use a leader of Anderson's caliber. And same with Stroud. I know that there was all of the character concerns getting discussed. It's ridiculous. It's all just mostly in an effort to get him to fall. It's just a bunch of late hullabaloo to me. I think for the most part, you got 2 great leaders that are going to come in and be the go-to guys, which is something that the Texans have sorely missed. I mean, regardless of where you feel they're at in terms of contention, it doesn't really matter, because these are 2 guys that are going to help DeMeco Ryans recreate what he helped keep in place in San Francisco, and observe them create themselves in San Francisco.
Absolutely. Yeah. I want to say too that when we were watching the draft together, I was a big fan of, trading back up to 3, and just, I love that high risk, high reward. You want to go in, and if you want to go into the draft to make your team better, to try to win football games. And I think that you get your franchise guy potentially at number 2, and then you go in and you get a big staple on the defense that's going to be there for a lot of years that you would hope. I loved that. I love those at 2 and 3. I think high risk, high reward, that's the way that you got to do it these days. And I think I love the additions to the defense through the draft and even through free agency. Getting Shaquille Griffin, I think that was great. Getting Jimmy Ward, especially with bringing DeMeco Ryans in, where he's proven that he can command an elite defense. I think it's going to be more of a challenge, certainly, in Houston. But he's proven that he can command an elite defense, and they made a lot of big moves to make that happen and to get him pieces that he's going to need to get the defense where it needs to be.
They got Shaquille Griffin on the cheap, too. I liked that signing. Mm-hmm. It was just a few guys that they just kind of stole out of free agency. I know Griffin was a late signing here, so he's fresh in our mind. But even, bringing in Denzel Perryman, I think, was one of their signings this offseason. He's always been underrated, a really dependable kind of in-space backer. And that's kind of what they need. They didn't have a whole lot to work with there. They've had Kirksey for some time, and he's always solid. But Perryman actually adds a little bit of pop in the linebacking core, which I like that addition a lot. And obviously Jimmy Ward, it's the same thing there. I believe his deal was a 1-year contract as well. I would say the same thing with Jimmy Ward. It's like, what are we missing with this guy? Why can't him and Schultz both be multi-year deals? I think, especially when you consider that D'Amico Ryans is bringing Ward in from San Francisco. He's a guy that knows the scheme very well. He knows exactly what they're trying to recreate here in Houston. So gotta love that signing. And that kind of lends to an overall point that we have to talk about with this young secondary. I mean, there's so many good pieces here. I think I'm probably one of the few people that's talking about Jalen Petrie as like seriously as he should be being discussed, because I mean he was working with basically nothing around him and still managed to shine quite a bit last season. Stingley, bit of a up and down first season, but we know the kind of talent that he brings. And even Steven Nelson, I mean, I fully expect Shaq Griffin to probably take control of the starting corner job across from Stingley, but Steven Nelson is no slouch, and he's still a vet that can get it done for you if the Griffin experiment doesn't go according to plan. But yeah, for the most part, I think it's interesting. This Houston roster, it doesn't feel like a team that is in a lengthy rebuild, only in the sense that their moves kind of indicate they want some serious year one impact from this class. And it makes sense. There are some decently strong position groups to work with on the roster as is. I think the other point to be made, just kind of in closing with Houston, is when you look first glance at this roster, you may not feel there's a whole lot of starting player turnaround level impact. I mean, in reality, you only have a few changes in their starting players in terms of like who you would expect to have impact. Not necessarily that they didn't change things around quite a bit, but when you look at the depth additions, a few more names to bring up would be, like you said, Xavier Hutchinson is a good kind of hedge for the receiving core. Henry To'oTo'o, someone maybe with development you could expect to fill in for Christian Kirksey once it's time to move on, or even Perryman, depending on how long his stint goes with the team. But I think To'oTo'o has a future with this roster. And the other thing to highlight was Chase Winovich. He was another Shaq Griffin-esque kind of signing in free agency. I felt that they kind of stole him away from the Patriots. The Patriots had a bit of a wealth of D-line guys that they needed to keep around, and Winovich seemed to slip through the cracks. I don't know if you land the same place, but I'm a pretty big fan of Winovich, and I think it makes an overall point about with guys like him and then the Dylan Horton draft pick. I mean, this is a deep roster where now they may be able to get it done rotating in second and third unit guys rather than before it was like nothing but no names here for the most part.
Yeah, I agree. I think having depth is going to be super important. I mean, especially if Will Anderson ends up hitting. Having a lot of good rotational depth around the D-line and a lot of young players that if they end up working out, they're going to be on the cheap. I think that Houston fans should be excited about the future of the defense in general, but especially the D-line. And I really like what you had to say about Petrie as well. Yeah, I think that Houston fans should be excited about the future of this defense. I think if D'Amico Ryans ends up working out, that defense is just going to continue to improve and get better.
Ryans has a lot to work with here, and I do expect some level of first-year success. I don't know if I want to project where they finish in this division, but I just think this is a different iteration of the Houston Texans than we're used to seeing, which is nice. It's nice to see them not just in the complete bowels of misfortune right now. It was tough for a while. It was tough.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, they only won a handful of games the last 4 years. It's their fourth head coach in 4 years. So I think if D'Amico Ryans even comes in and goes 5-12, I think that's an improvement. I think that you're happy to see that.
I can't remember what I was watching too long ago, but they were saying that Houston is currently paying salaries to 4 different head coaches. So
that is correct.
Regardless of the outcome for Ryans, it seems he's going to have a lot of time to figure this out if things don't go great initially.
Exactly. And I think, just in general, I think Texans fans have reason to be excited. I think the future of this team is really bright. And if Ryans ends up working out and if some of these pieces end up working out, there's no reason to not be excited. They are still in a rebuild, I will say. I don't expect them to be, making any splashes. I don't expect them to make playoffs, but they will certainly be an improved team. And getting into a situation like this with a new head coach that is proven to build and can maintain an elite defense with a good O-line, potentially franchise quarterback, really great running back. I think that there's reason to be excited for sure.
I see the vision. I do see the vision.
I'm trusting the process.
Trusting the process, seeing the vision. That's right. all of the cliches. So
I'm losing in the playoffs. Sorry.
Right. Just normal Houston things. if they even get there, I think if they get there, they'd be satisfied. So that's year one. Round 1 loss wouldn't be an L for this team at this juncture.
Oh no, I was talking about Embiid. Trusting the process, getting
gotcha.
Building that team for 10 years just to lose in the playoffs.
Yeah.
Yup.
Trusting the process only works in some instances. And so pour one out for Philly, man. They've had a hard year.
Yeah.
That's
all right. The Eagles are insane. I
would love my teams to all be as good as they are. But to have taken the kind of losses they took these for basketball, and I know that I think it was a hockey that the Flyers were tough to watch this year for times. It's just like, man. But you know what? Future is very,
Eagles,
very
fly.
for them. Yeah, I don't think anybody cares there too much as long as Philly for football is good.
Yeah.
Okay, so natural transition here to the Colts. I kind of feel fairly similarly about where the Colts are to the Texans. Like, things that stood out to me. Let's just go right off the rip. Really, really good draft class. That's the first thing I think we need to talk about here. This top, what is it? 6 players off of the draft class, man. I love these additions. A few times where I felt maybe they could have gotten a little bit higher impact position necessarily, but all in all, liked it okay. There were a few times where I felt like there were maybe a little bit more polished players on the board where they took other guys. But the thing with the top 6 to me is it's like so much versatility. They only double dipped at one position, and both of the cornerbacks they selected I was a really big fan of. Julius Brents is a super physical, big, just a dog, really. A Kansas State guy, man. He's a good player, and fully expect him to be starting day one for them. And then as far as Josh Downs, a lot of people felt like was the most polished slot, not named Jackson Smith-Njigba in this whole class here. Josh Downs his skill set doesn't really match the body type. He's very physical at the catch point. He has 50-50 ability despite maybe a little bit of size limitations. He plays so much larger than he is. And just really good polish, a guy that's going to be very, very helpful for probably Anthony Richardson. I know some Colts fans are like, give him a year, let's play Minshew. I fully expect it to be Richardson. Where do you land on that?
Well, first off, I want to say I do completely agree with you that this was one of my favorite drafts. I mean, especially the 1st through 4th rounds. I feel like these are all just hits, and I do really, really like that Julius Brents pick in the 2nd round. Like you said, super, super physical corner. He's going to win at the point of attack, and not only that, but the dude can hit. He's going to be able to punish you if, all these spread offense trying to dump the ball off. He's going to be able to win at the point of attack, and if you're slipping, he's going to punish you for that. I love that pick in the 2nd round. As far as the Richardson and Minshew situation goes, I kind of been falling in the line of I think we'll see Minshew start probably half of the season. The reason that I say that is because we have Steichen coming in, who already has coaching experience with Minshew. They were together in Philly. And I think as far as having a backup goes, having a really good plug and play like Minshew is really a great opportunity, especially if you're already familiar with the style of offense that your coach is going to want to run. I see Minshew starting at least the first half of the season. If Richardson does come in and take over, I'm not upset about that. If Richardson is a week one starter, we know his floor. I think that he has probably the highest floor of some of the quarterbacks that were taken off of the board, especially when you consider that rushing attack with Jonathan Taylor. I think just those two guys' physical attributes alone are going to create problems for defenses. Overall, though, I think he does need some time to sit, just because the only reason I say that is because even from a film standpoint, he only started, 13 games at Florida. There's just not a whole lot of sample size of him competing against guys at this talent level. So I think that just getting him comfortable, getting him sized up with the rest of the league, see how fast it is, how everybody's going to play, I think is going to be really important. And having a guy like Minshew that you can plug and play, I think that's a win, especially paired with Steichen. But like I said, if they spent the capital on him, if they want to plug him in and let him go, that's not what I would advise. It's not what I would want to see as a Colts fan. But I think if they want to do it, I think that they will certainly have some success. I think that we've seen with Steichen that he's clearly able to develop the best of the talent that he's given. And if it ends up not working out, then you can plug and play Minshew, and I think you're pretty happy with that.
Mm-hmm. That's fair. And I think they did a good job of balancing in the draft class help for Richardson or whoever it is starting at quarterback, along with some defensive additions, because I think on both sides of the ball here, they're not far off from having some good things going for them. I mean, we're not too far removed from the Phillip Rivers year, which I know a lot of people are hard on them for the rolling out vets back to back to back like they have, but they showed some really good things with this core on both sides of the ball. You've got Quentin Nelson still, you have Ryan Kelly at center, Braden Smith's a pretty standout right tackle. The Bernard Raymond pick, we'll see. It was questioned quite a bit initially, and then the Blake Freeland thing kind of, the pick for Blake Freeland in, what was it, the 4th round?
Yeah, 106.
Yeah, it kind of shows they're looking for competition there at the very least. But it's a strong line, and they already had a pretty nice little wide receiver duo in Pittman and Pierce. So adding Josh Downs to that, I like kind of what they're trying to do here. Another thing that kind of fell under the radar here was bringing in Isaiah McKenzie in free agency. He's going to be their 4th receiver. He was pretty good. He was pretty good for the Bills as really kind of their de facto 3rd for some time, and he won't even be a large part of this offense. He's just going to be the kind of get him in space, make a move type of guy for them early on.
Definitely.
Another maybe underrated draft pick that I wanted to bring up was Evan Hull. He's going to be one of their receiving back for them primarily, but he fills a need. They had really just a bunch of backups who could come in and take carries. They didn't really have a guy that they could deploy in the passing game, and there's just a lot of room for creativity in the offense overall, like you said, between Jonathan Taylor as a threat, Pittman on the deep ball, what they can get out of him, between Pierce and Downs, and then if it is Richardson, that rushing ability, there's so much versatility that they can do with this. They can dump it off to Evan Hull. They can run play action with JT. I like the odds, like you're saying, of not only Richardson or Minshew having a really good floor in this offense this year, but they could maybe even make a little bit of noise if things go their way. They're going to need a few things to fall their way and in bunches, but
definitely
there's a world where this team threatens for the division if the offense becomes what it could be based on the talent here.
Definitely. Yeah, I agree completely. I really, really liked getting Josh Downs in the 3rd. That's somebody I think a lot of people had in the same tier as somebody like Tank, for example, but he's just a more polished receiver to me. I think he's clearly somebody that can go in and contribute year one. And, even if it's Minshew or Richardson, I think you're happy to have Josh Downs in the slot paired with Pierce and Pittman. I think it's going to cause some problems. And, the line, we know what kind of a guard Quentin Nelson is. We know exactly what they can do in the run game already. And if they are able to get Richardson in, maybe halfway in the season and just let him do his thing, let him get comfortable, let him use that mobility and speed and size, I think that there's plenty to be excited about. I think it's a really, like we've been saying, I think the floor is pretty high. And I really like just in general the way that they're putting this offense together. In the AFC, you've got to take the risks. You got to go high risk, high reward. The conference is too good. The quarterbacks are too good. You have to go get a guy like Richardson, because if he works out, then all of a sudden you could end up being competitive with 5 or 6 teams in the conference for a really long time. So just getting Downs in the third after getting Richardson and Brents, really big fan of that. Another pick I really liked in the draft was Adebaware in the fourth. That guy is an incredible athlete. I don't know how much you saw of his measurables, but you could plug him in at D end or D tackle just because of those measurables. His athletic testing numbers were just off the chart. First player under 280 pounds to run a sub 4.5 40. I think he ran a 4.49. He also had a 37.5-inch vertical. Like, this dude is just big and fast, and you can plug him in anywhere on that line. I really liked where they got him in the fourth, and I think there's a lot of really young talent again on this team that is very exciting.
Mm-hmm. I was kind of waiting to transition to defense before I brought up Adeware, but yeah, I'm fully aware of Adebaware. I am fully aware of what he brings from a physical standpoint. Great selection there, insane value where they were able to select him. I mean, round 4 is nowhere near where he was getting talked about in the lead up. And normally you see a guy that performs so well in the testing area, he's going to shoot right up. But inexplicably, he's available for them, and they take advantage, which is great because this defensive front was already a strength. There's not any necessarily stars outside of Buckner, really, to me, but at least on the line, that is. Kwity Paye has been a solid guy that, he can get it done for you. He's physical. He's very, very strong. He can hold that edge. He hasn't developed really as much as you would have maybe liked for what you thought you could get out of him as far as pass rush goes, but just a solid contributor there. And obviously Buckner doesn't seem to be going anywhere. There was a lot of speculation about him potentially getting dealt for their cap purposes, but I never thought that really made a whole lot of sense, considering Buckner is the highest impact player on this defense, period, to me. You can make the case for Shaq Leonard, but post-injury, we don't know whether Shaq is going to return to form or not. I would love to see him do so. But yeah, Buckner is a big part of what they do, and plugging in Adebaware alongside him, I don't know if they plan to necessarily play him at inside or outside as much, but the one thing I thought about looking at their offseason moves that kind of points me to say both with that is that they did sign Taven Bryan as a free agent acquisition, and he hasn't been at all what they hoped he would be in Jacksonville prior. But that is a guy that likes to kick inside and out, and I know that the Colts do like large D linemen that can kind of threaten inside and out quite a bit. So I would expect to see Adebaware maybe moving around the line a little bit, especially considering his measurables. He's a legit edge threat, and he is a legit interior threat. It depends the way they mold his body, but he's versatile enough to do a lot for them, which is what they need.
I think that's the best way to get everything that you can get out of him too, right? I mean, if you have that guy with that kind of athletic skill set, just line him up wherever you need him to line up, and he's just going to go and game break. I think that's really ultimately how you're going to get the most out of him. He's kind of a matchup nightmare. He would be hard to stop as a D tackle, even with a double team, just because he's so fast off the ball, and he is so explosive and so athletic that you can line him out on the edge. And I think there's going to be a lot of tackles that are not going to be able to get on the outside and hold him enough if he just run around him at that kind of speed. I think I couldn't agree with you more. I think there's kind of been an indication that he's going to be able to move all around the line, and I think that's really how you're going to be able to get the most out of his talent as well.
Yeah, a bit of a poor man's Kalijah Cansey, and that's only off of polish, not in terms of talent. He could very well become just what Kalijah Cansey is, or better in time. He has all of the upside. I don't know how reasonable it is to think what his year one impact can be. He is quite raw as a prospect, but all the signs are there that he can develop into something like legitimate for them, and that's what they need right now. They need guys with a long-term future on this roster.
Definitely.
And that's another good transition point here. Samson Ebikam was one of the things that really stood out to me. I know there's a bit of NFC West bias there, but man, I watched Samson Ebikam dominate for the Rams defense during their Super Bowl run. And just years had passed. I mean, Ebikam was always a great contributor, just so strong. Just plays angry. Ebikam is ferocious on the line, and they can kind of play him in interesting ways. I think he's going to get maybe a little bit of time at the Sam spot in obvious pass rushing situations, but he can also rotate for them as a pure defensive end, and that's kind of where his fit is in this scheme. But he looked so great with San Francisco last year, Ebikam. He fit right in with what they're trying to do, and the crossover is clearly there with Buckner. They love these type of just beefy dudes that have insane hand speed and insane get off the ball, like you're saying. This is where the Colts like to be strongest, is on their front seven. And the line is looking to be shaping into the way they want it to look. They're a few additions away.
Agreed.
But the depth is there right now, and that's fun. I like that a lot.
Agreed. Yeah. Just to touch on what you were saying about Ebukam, I really, really like. I know that he had a very, very nice season. And I think he almost had 10 sacks, if I'm not mistaken. Clearly a player of high talent. And I think just what we were talking about earlier, just with players that have high motor, high athletic ability, good size, if all of the pieces are in the right order, the front seven is looking scary, especially. He's
just a fuck the play up guy, like you're saying.
Yeah.
He actually only had 5 sacks last season, just so you're aware.
Oh, just 5. Okay. Yeah, especially if Shaq Leonard comes back and continues to be who he is. That front seven is going to be no joke.
Well, that's the thing, right? It's not so much about the sack production with a guy like Ebikam, who's going to mostly just be rotating for your line, but he is a rotational lineman where when he's in the game, he's a constant threat, and he may not get the sack, but he's going to make life difficult for the line. He's got a great motor. He's constantly creating pressure if he isn't necessarily finishing the play. And I mean, he probably showed you about the maximum he could be in the San Francisco defense, but that doesn't mean that he can't take on more workload than he was asked necessarily. And I think that's going to be needed here because the starters for the Colts aren't necessarily as strong as they would probably like. I think they plan to rotate these guys a ton, which is just kind of the norm in the NFL right now. You want to have a stronger rotation than necessarily like star power as starters, in my opinion. But it's a good tie-in to go to linebacker. I'll quickly give my thoughts. They did lose Bobby Okereke to the Giants in free agency this year. He was a pretty underrated contributor for them on the linebacking core, especially because with the Shaq Leonard injury, he was one of the guys that really stepped up for them and kept this defense respectable when they were dealing with all of their issues and obviously never getting off the field with the way the offense was last year. But Okereke played well, and I think he's going to be a good player for the Giants now. I like that signing, but the interesting development as a result of Okerike's loss is that EJ Speed, who was a bit of a rotational linebacker, kind of the guy that was spelling Okereke and Leonard for some time, is now going to get his shot to step in and be the guy at will. So, and for me personally, I really liked what I saw from EJ Speed. It's just, he has a great name, EJ Speed.
Oh, of
very,
course,
very
yeah.
much exactly how he plays. He's a rally tackler. You know, he's gonna get after you. He's pretty decent in coverage. I think that's where he needs to take the next step as a starter, show that he can be dependable in coverage. But the hope we have is that Leonard puts together a healthy season this year, and it's going to make life a lot easier on a still developing EJ Speed for them.
Agreed.
It's the similar thing. I want to touch back on my point earlier. Like, there are a few select guys that you know are legit NFL players on this team on both sides of the ball, and where what I was saying with Quentin Nelson. Sorry, my cat is causing havoc. She just wants attention. But anywho, it's like I was saying with guys like Quentin Nelson, Ryan Kelly. These are dependable guys. They have those on the defense, and Kenny Moore to me fits into that description for the Colts. Kenny Moore, guy with excellent ball skills. You've seen the highlight clips for the one-handed interceptions and all the things he's capable of. They have not put a lot around him, and I'm particularly really excited about the addition of Brents and Darius Rush. I still expect Kenny Moore to start on the outside, but the capability to potentially rotate him into the slot on occasion, depending on the matchup they get at wide receiver, is really tantalizing, because Moore is such a in-your-face kind of sticky guy. I would liken him to a developed version of a player we talked about last week, DJ Turner on the Bengals. Just a very fast, in-your-face type of corner. He plays a lot bigger than he is. Again, just can get that ball turned over if you throw it to him. And he just needs a little bit more around him. Brents is a physical guy that complements his skill set well. He's going to be a staple on the outside, defending the X receivers, the physical, just prototypical deep ball 50-50 A.J. Brown-like guys. And then Darius Rush is actually quite similar to Kenny Moore in skill set. So that's where I kind of look for it. I think Rush could threaten to be the starting nickel year one. But depending on the matchup, say they're playing, I know it's not going to happen based on the matchups, but say they play a Rams kind of team where there is a Cup-like receiver on the inside, I see a world where they can bump Kenny Moore into the nickel and do his best to lock down a guy explosive that they're kind of that's explosive like that. They're trying to fixate the offense around. And Darius Rush can bump outside in his place and hold his own year one. I think Darius Rush, sure, he was a fifth-round pick, but he plays a lot better than his draft selection dictates. And again, this is a guy with just a lot of good instincts at the corner position. He can kind of do for you some of the things that Kenny Moore does for you, and that's interesting to me. That's a big factor for, as much as we were talking about the D-line rotating their guys in and out, I think the secondary has a ton of versatility to do the same, which is quite interesting based on maybe the scheme they're going to run here. I don't know how much Steichen is going to have his pause in the discussion defensively, but if they're doing things the way that Philly likes to do things in some regard on that side of the ball, you could see a C.J. Gardner-Johnson type of year out of Kenny Moore if they use him in that way. I think the amount of production he can get as far as interceptions goes, it could be far higher than we've seen for him with his skill set, and they've put a lot more around him to do that. So that's really all I have to say as far as the secondary goes.
Yeah, that's great.
Natural transition point, I think we covered the Colts really well. Again, this is a team, it's kind of weird. I feel like we were maybe a little more optimistic about this team than the Texans for the first year. But both trending the same way. A lot of good things to think about, a lot of things to like about where they're headed, the young talent they added, and really what they already had. So
Definitely.
fun.
Yeah, a lot to be happy about in the future in Indianapolis.
For sure. I talked so much just now. I apologize.
No, that was great. Yeah, that was fantastic.
I'm pretty bullish on their secondary, so I wanted to say my piece there. But I would love for you to kick off with the Titans. Tell me what stood out on offense with the Titans here, Tennessee.
Yeah, so let's see here. Tennessee, clearly they are rebuilding, and I wanted to kind of get this this discussion going on a place where you and I disagreed a bit in the draft. We had some differing opinions on Will Levis. However, I do want to say getting Will Levis at the top of the second round is nothing but a steal. I do not care. Any of those criticisms that I had for Will Levis was at where he was projected to go, right? Like potentially top 10, top 15. Right. The fact that he fell to the second round, if you're Tennessee, I love that turnaround there in the first and second round. You went ahead and you got your blue chip offensive lineman in Skoronski, and then at the top of the second, you went ahead and were able to snag Will Levis. Yeah, I love that. Those are both big wins in my book. Despite the reservations that I have had about Will Levis's success, as like a top 10 pick potentially. I'm much more happy if I'm a GM taking him at the top of the second round than I am, at the top of the first round, especially after, picking Skoronski. I think those two back to back makes this a really strong draft for them, in my view. I also was really interested in their third round pick in Spears out of Tulane. I think he's a great complement to Derrick Henry as a third down back. He's great in open space. He can catch the ball out of the backfield, which, as an interesting side note, Dontrell Hilliard finished the team last year as the leader in receiving touchdowns. So clearly this is a guy that on third down situations where if you have a complement to Henry who's just going to be able to run it down your throat for 1,300 yards a season, if you can get him in on third downs, he's a great safety valve. He's great in open space. He can score anywhere, anytime. I really liked that selection in the third round as well. I think they added a lot of really decent weapons here, especially with the addition of Dillard as well, shoring up some offensive line problems. They got Taylor Lewan and Robert Woods off of their, and Nate Davis, got them off of their books. Robert Woods should not have been paid what he was in the first place. I think the one thing that stood out to me with what they were doing in the draft is that this team is rebuilding, but I think that with what they've been doing in the draft, they're going to play the same way. They're going to manage the clock. They're going to commit to the run game, and they are going to try to squeeze out wins in the margins and in the trenches. Overall, I think this is a good coaching philosophy and a good scheme philosophy, considering the state of the wide receiver room and the recent play of Ryan Tannehill. I don't think we see Levis in year one at all, especially considering that Tannehill's contract voids at the end of this year. So I think you get one more year of Tannehill. You're still rebuilding, but I think there's a lot of really good pieces that they've added here. And I think that run game and Derrick Henry are going to continue to be what they're going to be. And with the addition of Spears, I think it's been a great draft.
It's kind of funny, right? Because you open this discussion with I'm going to bring up a contention point that we both seem to view differently. For me personally, I feel that the selection of Will Levis was really the only thing that I look at and I say I get it. I don't think I don't get it with this Tennessee team, man. I don't. I love Peter Skoronski. Let me start there. Good, solid selection. Maybe not necessarily a high impact position for where you took him, but I mean, about as polished as it gets. And you're at pick 11 now. You're
Yep.
far out of the tier 1 guys for the draft. But Peter Skoronski's going to be a solid guard for you. But hopefully it's for Mike Vrabel as a coach eventually, because I'll be completely honest with you. These picks seem like great value for whoever the next coach is, because I really don't want to be this guy. I've loved the Titans for some time. I love what they've done, but let me just start here, right?
Yeah.
This roster is designed around Derrick Henry.
Absolutely.
And we have at most 1 to 2 years left of what Derrick Henry is
At this production, definitely.
Yes. Yeah. And that's really where my problem stems from, is that it's not my beef with the picks, right? Tyjae Spears was a guy that I loved. Mm-hmm. Josh Weil, very underrated tight end that they stole in the 5th round. I think he was getting talked about as really outside of the top options, which this was a deep class. He was a guy that got overlooked, but I think in other classes, less deep classes, he's a surefire 3rd round pick. Just a very polished receiving prospect. I mean, he's not dominant physically in any one way, but as a 5th round selection or even into the 3rd, I think he was good. But again, just to tie it up, I don't see it, man. It's Andre Dillard at left tackle. Maybe I'm not plugged in enough to know, but Andre Dillard he's not a mainstay at left tackle, man. And then they brought in Brunskill at guard. He can contribute. You said earlier about Tannehill's drop-off in play. This goes without saying, and I hate to hit them this hard because it's like you trade A.J. Brown, what do you expect? But, Tannehill should not be held accountable for his level of play at any point this last season or the prior, to me. Because when you're working with the likes of Westbrook-Ikine, Kyle Phillips, who's a decent slot, and, Treylon Burks, man, another prospect that I like, but at the end of the day, I just don't see the cohesive vision with this team. It's like you're getting pulled all these different directions. You trade A.J. Brown,
yep,
and you make win-now moves like signing Andre Dillard and drafting Peter Skoronski. He's a high-impact first-year guy, and he's going to be a mainstay for them, but trading A.J. Brown and selecting Treylon Burks is it's so short-sighted. It's such a disservice to your quarterback who had such a good story coming in. And I know people feel a type of way about Tannehill with the way he handled the Malik Willis draft pick. But even the Malik Willis draft pick proves how short-sighted some of these moves have been. And I know it was a prior GM. They're doing a bit of a transitional period right now. I just don't see the vision on offense here. We can transition to defense eventually, but I'd love to hear your thought. Am I too low? Am I being too hard?
You're absolutely right. I think that just the decline of this wide receiver room, I'm not sure why you give away A.J. Brown in any circumstances, especially after we've seen what he's been in Philadelphia. And, clearly this is a team that they are rebuilding, right? I think that anybody could agree that this is a rebuilding team. And I'm looking at all of their subtractions of all the money that they got off the cap from getting rid of Luwan and Nate Davis, Bud Dupree, Robert Woods, Zach Cunningham. They're clearly dumping assets to get more space on the cap. So you're clearly rebuilding. Why is Derrick Henry still on your roster? If you're rebuilding, what is the point of having Derrick Henry still be there when you could trade him and get more value? If we're full rebuild, great, let's do it. Let's get rid of the assets. Let's turn around some of our great value that we've had, and let's turn them into future assets, right? Let's not just have an asset just to have it and to have the last 2 years of his career where he's probably in his prime go to waste. I don't understand that at all. Like, you're not competing for a division win. I don't think you're competing to be in the playoffs even. I don't understand what Derrick Henry is still doing on the roster. If we're full rebuild mode, let's go ahead. Let's trade Henry. Let's get some more assets that we can build in the draft, and let's just call a spade a spade. This offense, like you said, I don't understand where the cohesion is. The only thing that they seem to want to do is to have a decent line, have Derrick Henry run it down everybody's throat for as long as possible while he's still healthy, and to try to squeeze out very marginally thin victories. What kind of offensive vision is that, especially in the AFC? That's not going to take you anywhere. Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
This is where I say I don't see the vision. I don't see the cohesive decision making. And there was a long storied history of kind of discord between the front office and the coaching vision anyway.
Right.
From what I understand, nobody outside of the prior GM was on board with the A.J. Brown loss. But the overarching point to me is they look at their defense and they have some really good things on defense, and they can talk themselves into, well, we don't need to do a full rebuild. We need to do a retool. Everywhere you look on Titans, I was doing research for this pod. Everywhere you look on Titans offseason grading and everything, they're saying, well, this is more of a retool. You don't take Will Levis as your developmental quarterback in a retooling kind of era for you. And
completely agree.
And it's really, really a shame. I saw the Jeffrey Simmons extension, and man, I love Jeffrey Simmons. Such a dominant player, such a alpha. Got to be the most dominant defensive player in the league right now. I mean, there's arguments possibly for Parsons, but when you and even Bosa. But when you consider what Simmons has been working with and what he's been able to do, it seems pretty obvious to me that he's the most defensive or dominant defensive player in the league. And I see why Mike Vrabel is able to talk himself into this retooling phase, because they do have such good options available on defense. But man, I'm at a loss for words. I'm just so confused about what they're trying to do here. And the worst part about it really is that I think Vrabel is going to be given time. And
certainly.
And it's not so much that I don't want them to keep Vrabel, but it's kind of like, if we continue in this direction of not knowing what the hell we want to be, then what the hell are we ever going to turn into?
Exactly.
It's like you said, are we going to ride Derrick Henry the next 2 years and give him nothing to work with as far as receiving core goes around him? I need to hedge myself just a tad. I want to bring up Chigo Okonkwo. Chigo Okonkwo had a really good first season, and I think he could be potentially excellent year two. But the question becomes, is this all strictly off of volume? Do we look at Tyjae Spears as a potential third down back having good impact because he's going to get so many opportunities? It's like they didn't address their deficiencies, and I find that deplorable. It's you got to find some way to get another wide receiver in the room. I know they want to lean into their strengths, but your strengths are running out of time, frankly.
Oh, certainly. I mean, yeah. I mean, when we're talking about this, right? Like a retooling, I think, we're talking about we're confused what the vision of this offense is. And I think that maybe we need to consider the idea that they don't know either. How can you possibly say that this is a retooling? Every roster at every stage of a rebuild, they are going to have incredible talent at their disposal. I don't think that there's been many teams that have been mid-rebuild that have no assets that are phenomenal whatsoever. Otherwise, there's nothing to rebuild, right? You don't get to turn that around for other assets. But yeah, I think you're dead on that. The reason to be confused is because I don't think they even know what they want to create on offense either. I don't know what they expect to happen, but do you think Derrick Henry can carry you to another 7-8 win season? I mean, potentially, yeah, he's that good. and he's that productive. But overall, is that what we're trying to do here, is to just create as thin of a chance as possible to compete in an already obscenely talented conference? No, I don't understand that at all either.
No, and I was just kind of looking over the draft order a little bit last minute to kind of, because I want to be fair to them. Like, maybe they should have made a different selection when they made another, right? If you want to be totally fair to them and say they're going strictly best player available when they take Levis and Skoronski, then I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt on that.
Two great picks, by the way, I would
Yeah,
say.
and there was a bit of a wide receiver run in that second round, so I understand maybe thinking that the value just isn't there to make the selection, but don't you think maybe when you're in this level of dire straits, you bite the bullet and do what it takes to move up and select? Because we're talking about round 381 Tyjae Spears, not 10 picks earlier. You had a run that included Cedric Tillman, who is, again, we talked about last week, a guy with a lot of upside, things that they are missing in Tennessee in terms of deep ball production, physicality. Jalen Hyatt, a total burner, a guy that can unlock that bomb ability that we know Levis has. And I'm not saying they can't make selections the following year. I mean, it's like you said, I don't think we fully expect this to be a playoff contending roster by any means. But I mean, even the team we talked about a couple conversations ago, Nathaniel Dell, he was at pick 69. So to me, it's just like, I don't know how you can continue to ignore this and then hold Ryan Tannehill accountable and say, yeah, we're trying to find replacements for you. If anything, it's like you said, deal these guys, deal Henry, deal Tannehill.
Yep.
Just roll Levis year one, get him the reps, because like right now the Tennessee Titans do not know what the hell that is they want to be offensively, and that's concerning. But
agreed.
Not
only that.
Yeah.
Not only that, but like you're totally right. Like let's go ahead. Let's dump Henry. Let's dump Tannehill, and we'll have more assets. And then when Levis has what would be a brutal year one, I would expect, then at least what his strengths and weaknesses are, and then you can look forward to the next draft and say, okay, what do we need to get Will Levis to be successful, rather than in this weird liminal space between like, okay, well, Tannehill doesn't have anybody to throw to, and Derrick Henry is going to get 35 touches a game, and we're going to hope that he maintains his health so that we have a chance at winning some games. And then you go into the next year where Tannehill's gone, hopefully Henry stays healthy. If not, then there's questions about Henry's health, and then you are rolling with Will Levis, and you have no idea what his skill set is. You have no idea what he's good at, what he's not good at. I'm confused about that.
Mm-hmm. All right, we've dunked on their offense enough, I think. I feel bad, Tennessee fans, man. I'm right there with you, because I love.
But we're not saying anything that they don't already know.
I'm sure a lot of them are right there with us, and it's really upsetting, because I love Mike Vrabel as a coach. I love a lot of the prospects they drafted, but when that's the thing with drafting, man, is if you're not taking guys that fit the scheme and fit what you do, then best player available only goes so far. I swear by best player available, but at the end of the day, you also have to be thinking about team fit, because team fit dictates level of success almost as much as talent, especially in those later round selections. They also brought Arden Key in. I believe they stole him from the Jaguars. So interesting, kind of trying to take
interdivision.
Trying to steal a prospect, I guess, from the leader. I think most people are kind of gunning for the Jaguars in this division right now, from everything I've been seeing. And another interesting one, I believe they lost Harold Landry for the season last year, and he's going to be returning, so that should be a nice boon for the D-line. Harold Landry, a monster when he's on the field. Another addition that I really liked and it stood out to me was Azeez Al-Shaair, a bit of underutilized cog in the San Francisco scheme. Obviously, they were leaning on their amazing linebacker duo of Greenlaw and Warner. But you saw Shire take snaps, kind of spelling those guys a little bit, maybe a little bit of Sam play on at times for them as well. Shire's really in the mold of a Niners style linebacker. He's very rangy. He's very powerful. He's got a good punch. He can get the ball out. I like that he attacks the ball a lot when he tackles. So he was a pretty underrated ad for them, and man, it's a kind of a scary prospect plugging him in here with as much talent as they do field. Like between Simmons, if Landry can put together a healthy season, Al-Shire coming in, probably being the starter day one. And like you're saying, they can rotate Arden Key, Sean Murphy-Bunting throughout the secondary. They're working with quite a bit here on defense. There are some holes, but nothing too remarkable to bring up.
So as far as the secondary goes, it is far from the worst that even we've covered. In my opinion, if you have differences in opinion,
I think it's pretty strong. I agree. Roger McCreary was a guy that I liked coming out of the draft last season. Another really, really physical corner, kind of plays in the mold of some of the guys we talked about this episode. He's a pretty good compliment. It'd be interesting to see what he can do year two.
Agreed.
If he keeps the starting job, which I kind of expect. But Murphy Bunting does like to rotate around a lot. I think he can play as much nickel as he can outside. But Caleb Farley's the wild card. You know how much I loved Caleb Farley coming out of the draft.
Yep.
Absolute monster. Very much in the Christian Gonzalez mold for a corner. He can take the ball away. He's tall. He's fast. Just can't stay on the field, sadly. And that's really been the carryover into the NFL, unfortunately. The injury history was it was a sign of things to come for him, unfortunately. But, man, would I love to see a healthy Caleb Farley get plugged into this defense.
Completely agree.
Roger McCreary bumped into nickel with his physical and good in press as he is. I think that could be really, really fun. They're probably not holding their breath for that at this juncture, but a boy can dream, Ryan, and I will remain a Caleb Farley lover until he is out of the league.
The Titans are built on nothing but dreams, brother.
I mean, on the offensive side of the ball, certainly.
I do want to say, anybody that says that they would cut off their dick to win a Super Bowl, I want to go play for that guy, because you know what? I agree.
Indeed.
If you're willing,
we need to be clear that we're Vrabel enthusiasts on this pod.
Absolutely, yes.
And I know there's a bit of a contract dispute there too with Byard. They actually asked Byard to take a pay cut last season, which was really surprising to me. I mean, it really showed. I think it was last season. I think it really shows the level of gall that this front office has.
Yes.
They're going to field their wide receiving core of Westbrook Akina, Kyle Phillips, and Treylon Burks, and then they're going to go to Kevin Byard and ask for a pay cut. Well,
let
me just finish. If I'm Kevin Byard and they say pay cut, motherfucker, for what? For who? You didn't pay A.J. Brown. Where's my money going? Where's that money going if it's not going to me?
When somebody like Kevin Byard comes in and they're like, "Hey, man, any way that we could get you on the cheap?" No, that's a hard no.
No. You mean the defensive captain of the team that's been the longest tenured Tennessee Titan on the whole roster, probably, or close to it? No, he's not taking a pay cut.
What are we talking about here?
And it's unreasonable
Absolutely
to ask
not.
him to do so. I don't think there's been any drop off in production. Really, he's been a Pro Bowl level free safety. He's been that his entire career. I just want to cap off last thing. We're clearly wanting to move off of the Titans at this point. Good God, I know I did too. But I almost took it for granted. Christian Fulton, man, gonna be CB1 for this team. He's a dog. He's got the ball skills. He's got it all. Christian Fulton, a very, very underrated player, and I'm very excited to see where he takes his career going forward, because he's another one of those guys. He's one of the mainstays alongside Harold Landry, Simmons, and Byard I think you're going to see good things from Fulton this year, and regardless of whether it's McCreary or Farley starting across from him, I think you're going to still see a lot of turnover production from the Tennessee Titans defense, and they're going to play the way Vrabel likes them to play. So that always makes this team a wild card. All in all, I'd say, obviously we aren't the highest, but we still love what they're doing on defense. We love the culture. We love what they want to be. But I think there is a bit of deliberation right now about what exactly it is they're trying to be in the future. And that's where we have a little bit of question marks, right?
Yeah, agreed.
Okay. No worries. Okay, so I've been kind of dominating the transitional things. I want you to kick it off again here with the Jags, because, man, is there a lot to talk about with this Jags team.
Certainly.
What were the favorites for you in the offseason moves? Anything concerning? Anything good? What do you think?
You know, I want to start this off by saying I'm very, very happy of the progression of Trevor Lawrence. I think he's finally becoming the quarterback that we knew that he could be, which is great. You know, I think we could see like a Josh Allen-esque year 3. He already had a vast improvement from year 1 to year 2 and surprised people, I think, in the playoffs, including myself. Really turned it on in the last half of that season. However, I do want to say that considering the amount of picks that they had going into this draft, I'm just going to say it was a mid-draft. They had so many picks that they were able to use. And I think given the state of the AFC South, I will say this take is with a grain of salt, because given the state of the NFC South, this draft can still both be painfully mid and still put the Jaguars with by far the brightest future this season and moving forward. And I think that has a lot to do with Doug Peterson giving them that bright future. But, you know, their GM, I don't think this GM, Trent Baalke, has been doing much to assist this future in the draft or in free agency. They weren't very aggressive in the free agency market this offseason, but I think that has a lot to do with the fact that they had so many draft picks that they thought, you know, we'll just get young talent in the draft, we'll develop them and get the talent on the cheap.
Right.
And we could potentially become a dynasty if Trevor Lawrence continues to play at this level on his rookie deal. But overall, man, there was just not a whole lot that stood out to me in terms of value. And I will say, this does also come at the heels of the ton of money that they spent in the last offseason getting Evan Ingram, getting Oluwaquan, Christian Kirk, Zay Jones, who turned out to be major hits for that offense. And plus, Calvin Ridley comes back this year. So clearly a ton to be excited about as far as that goes. But that's the biggest thing that stood out to me, is that they weren't super aggressive in free agency this year, and they just weren't able to capitalize on the amount of draft picks in the way that I expected they would.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Calvin Ridley addition via trade is very interesting. It's probably the number one swing point of the future of this team, at least in the following year. They lost Jawan Taylor at right tackle, I believe, yes, and they're going to now have Cam Robinson out with a suspension at left. Yep. That was their starting left tackle. So, man, that Calvin Ridley addition better pay dividends, because you're looking at a team that's coming into the season going to start most likely Anton Harrison, their first-round rookie, at the right tackle, and they're going to have former second-rounder Walker Little stepping in as the left tackle, most likely, starting left tackle. His skill set is suited for left tackle. I think you can expect at least average production from Little, so not overly concerned with him there. I think he'll be passable at minimum. I was a decent fan of him as a prospect coming out, but Anton Harrison may be in a decent position to succeed year one. Right tackle duties, kind of leans not so far into his strengths as a prospect. I think his foot speed and his pass pro are his strengths right now, but he'll be asked to do more of a kind of set the edge role, contribute in the run game on the right side, but at least he won't be most likely going against the premier blindside pass rushers, although they rotate them around a lot. But
certainly, and I think that even if it was maybe a bit of a reach where they got him, I think coming off the heels of that Cam Robinson suspension, it's good that they at least were able to address some of the concerns that they knew that they were going to have. At least until Cam Robinson comes back, they've got decent talent and rotational depth at tackle, and to be able to utilize the talent that they have to the best of their abilities until they have a fully healthy, fully available offensive line.
Well, and to expand on the point too, they're not going to be able to just completely insulate Harrison from players that are going to rotate onto his side. But what they can do, and it's convenient for them, they have a pretty formidable little trio on the interior offensive line with Fortner at center, Barch on the left guard spot, put together a decent season, and obviously Brandon Scherf, and a complete terror at right guard. So I think the plan, and obviously I believe in Doug Peterson's ability to mask some of these deficiencies, is that they're going to be cheating to Anton's side as a rookie and hoping that Walker Little can be, hold his own somewhat with this first starting opportunity. I was going to address something you'd said on the draft class, just because you'd spoken on how much you disliked the draft class. I agree for the most part that I think it's an underwhelming draft class. There are some gems hidden within, but these are a little more of the late round selections that I'm higher on. Anton Harrison's a great start. Pretty good value there at pick 27. But, man, the question mark for me was Brenton Strange at round 2. I think it's fair to say this is almost a third rounder in the sense that it's the very back end of the second round. But in such a deep tight end class, to come away with Brenton Strange as your second round pick, I mean, it felt to me that this team was a little too married to the idea of bringing in a tight end in this class, because if you missed out on the initial run of the top guys, either it's a panic pick or they see something in him. But based on what you're saying, Trent Baalke's history of kind of attempting to find these dudes, I think Trent Baalke is one of those classic GMs where he's mostly a chalk guy, where he's going to do well where kind of taking what's given in the early rounds, and this is a bit of an aberration. I just don't see it with Brenton Strange. That was surprising to me.
Agreed.
Tank Bigsby, round 3. That's not too bad a value, but again, a guy who I viewed as on the lower end of a strong running back class that you take in the third round. It's almost the same thing with Brenton Strange. These are two guys to me that were a lower tier of player that you took in the high tier range for their position. It's almost the opposite of what we saw with the Titans draft, where I love what the Titans did. They went BPA, but it wasn't a good team fit. I look at the Jags draft. This is almost the opposite of BPA, but the team fits are pretty good. The same goes with Ventrell Miller. Actually, Ventrell Miller was decent value where they took him. I think that makes sense taking him there. And that's another one where the team fit is great. As a linebacker alongside Devin Lloyd, he's a thumper. He's physical, he's fast.
Definitely.
Ventrell Miller can fit right in on the defense. But overall, find those early round selections questionable. Where I begin to enjoy what they did starts at round 5. They grabbed Yasir Abdullah, who was... He kind of fell on the wayside, wasn't as acknowledged or respected publicly as Yaya Diaby was on the same defense. He's kind of an interesting player. He's going to be a player that you can only play situationally early on until they develop him more. But he's kind of a weird hybrid-y tweener guy. But he has a place in this defense. They have a lot of versatility as it is, so I see a role for him. Antonio Johnson was a good pick, pretty underrated safety prospect. Parker Washington was one that really stood out to me.
In the 6th.
Parker Washington, one of the most polished slots in what was a pretty strong slot class. Maybe not strong wide receiver class overall, depending on what your needs were. And one could argue maybe they could have used a little more size. They already have quite a few smaller sized jitterbug types, but at the same time, his skill set is so much like a Christian Kirk. I see a world in which Christian Kirk really guides Parker Washington's development and gets him to a point where he can be a weekly contributor at the slot position and actually even be more of a deep threat than he was in college under his tutelage. But that's kind of summarizing my thoughts on the class. The picks beyond that, I don't really know. It's a lot of coin flips. They had a whole bunch of 7th rounders and 6th rounders, but yeah, I mean they finished, I'd say, strong in the meat of this class in the middle there. But I, for the most part, agree with your perspective. It's a bit of an underwhelming class when you needed a high impact class coming off of such a great season.
Agreed. However, like I said, I think that despite this painfully mid-draft, it's still the Jaguars, I think, are still the team in this division with the brightest future this season and beyond. I mean, just looking at this roster as it stands right now, with T-Law, Travis Etienne, Christian Kirk, Calvin Ridley, Zay Jones, Evan Ingram with Parker Washington.
Zay Jones as your 3, man, with Christian Kirk and Ridley. I mean,
yes,
Kirk and Ridley
it's going to be
hell
scary.
Of a one too alone.
And agreed. And I do want to say one thing too, is that I think that this upcoming season, this is going to be Travis Etienne's season, baby. All you fantasy heads out there, I am really high on Etienne coming into this season, just from a production standpoint. Especially if Trevor Lawrence continues to develop at the rate that he has. The run game is certainly going to have a lot of success when there's so much attention paid to that incredibly strong wide receiver core, and with Evan Ingram at tight end, I think that there's a lot of a lot of production value that Etienne is going to see this year, and I'm super high on that. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, addressing like Brenton Strange's skill set, it's a high upside kind of ability athletically, and I actually do like the idea of Evan Ingram kind of taking him under his wing and teaching him. Hopefully they prove me wrong. I'm never rooting against a guy, so I just want to clarify that.
Sure.
Brenton Strange, maybe he could turn it around, but from the overall perspective, right, just kind of stepping back a tad, at the very worst, with the sheer volume of their selections, they're going to have great depth now on what was already a very underrated roster in terms of like star power. Just because I know we didn't see an iteration with Ridley yet, but Ridley's addition, to me, it really unlocks all of the things that we were hoping they could become with Lawrence. I mean, he was already getting so much out of Kirk and Etienne in the passing game. Even Zay Jones had a pretty decent season, but now those guys become complements to the bread and butter of Calvin Ridley, and I think that's exactly the kind of guy Lawrence needs. I think that's where he's going to take his game to the next level, is now he has a go-to read, his bailout read, right? Or just fuck it, Ridley's down there somewhere, right?
Yeah.
And he already knows how to play within structure. He already knows how to spread the love. And I think that's just going to make him all the more dangerous. And yeah, like you said, I could see a breakout performance from Lawrence this year for sure. I think we covered the offense quite well. I'm impressed with the offense. I think it's the best in the division by quite a ways.
Agreed. Yeah, just one more thing on Lawrence before we move on. I do want to say that I think this team's success hinges on Trevor Lawrence continuing to develop into a superstar, which I think that he's going to. First year in the league, he had 12 touchdowns and a league-high 17 interceptions while completing just under 60% of his passes. Last year, those numbers improved to 25 touchdowns to only 8 interceptions, completing above 65% at 66.3% completion rate. It's very eerily similar. I just wanted to get your take on this. It's eerily similar to the Josh Allen development that we saw in Buffalo. Year one, people talking maybe bust territory year 2, a little bit better, and then year 3 just took that gigantic leap to what we are seeing here. I'm just curious your thoughts on that before we move on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I mean, obviously the presence of Urban Meyer in those early years was just, it was a detriment to everyone's development on the team.
And even to his marriage.
Yeah. I'm not here to dunk on Urban. I think he's had plenty of that as it is. But generally, like, I think the thing to bring up here is, like, the offensive personnel, there's a lot of good things going for these guys. But the only surefire star to me is Calvin Ridley. Kirk is like teetering, but I think I need to see one more season of that caliber before I'm willing to really put Kirk in a star category. So really, when you look at the overall talent, for reference, just within the conversation's context, like if you plug C.J. Stroud into this offense, we're not talking about it being as high flying, as dominant as we expect it to be, and that's because it's not so much that any of these guys individually are so elite outside of Ridley, but it's that we know with Lawrence's development trending the way it is and what we saw him do last season, he's getting things out of these guys that other teams couldn't get out of these guys. I mean, this is a throwback to that Philly team that went to the Super Bowl in some ways, where they had so many cast-offs. You remember freaking Jason Kelsey, screaming about it in the where he's like wearing the turban and all that. But like, that's the mentality I have with this team, is like, these guys were doubted, these guys were moved on from by other rosters. It's the same with Zay Jones. They said he couldn't do it. Evan Ingram, they kicked him to the curb. Christian Kirk, they said, you're not good enough, we're going to get somebody better for Murray. I think that's a uniting factor amongst this offense. These are all guys with something to prove, and I love that for them. I
Chips
think
on their shoulder.
It's excellent. One last thing, too, before we move off from offense, because I'm glad you kind of gave me a little more time to think, is, boy, oh boy, man, this running back room is deep. It's deep. They've got,
Indeed.
I think it's kind of cool. I would liken it to, like, they have this duo that they plan to roll out in Tank Bigsby and Etienne, where Bigsby will be the early down guy, and Etienne's going to get a lot of the passing down work and maybe goal line stuff too. And then you almost have a mirror image of that duo in your third and fourth guy, because you bring in Dearness Johnson, who can be like a physical downhill runner the way Tank Bigsby can. And JaMychal Hasty is like a poor man's Etienne in a lot of ways. So,
indeed,
yeah, if they get down injury-wise with the running back position, I think they're going to still be able to do the Philly Peterson scheming type of thing, where they're using all these guys in different crazy ways. It's very much this is like, it's got Philly DNA all over this team to me, man, because it's like,
ooh, I like that.
It reminds me of the Corey Clement, LeGarrette Blount, freaking Jay Ajayi. Like, it's like, man, there's just so many weapons in the running back room, and you know they're going to use them in versatile ways. So that's going to be fun to watch too.
Agreed.
Why don't you go ahead and transition us on defense? Just start off with your thoughts there.
Let's take a look here. I don't have many notes. I'm sure that there's much to talk about, but if you wanted to. Just go ahead. If you've got something you want to say.
There is one thing I would say is that the secondary is the thing I get attracted to immediately. You've got this prolific cornerback duo in Tyson Campbell and Darius Williams. I am the biggest fan of Tyson Campbell. I think the only ones that are bigger fans are got to be Jags fans in the world. Tyson Campbell is so dominant, so physical, so fast, great ball skills. He really brings it all. The only thing that he's slightly deficient in is size, but he plays much larger than he is. And pair him up with Darius Williams, who they've had for a little while now. They added him off the Rams. He's used to playing alongside a very dominant CB1. He did that with Ramsey for a long time and had a lot of success. He's another guy that great ball skills on Darius Williams. He had a lot of interceptions that final year with Ramsey, and I think as you see Campbell develop, you're going to see Darius Williams really come back into his own and even maybe become a Rams version again, where he's picking off 6 to 7 interceptions, passes from these quarterbacks a year. I mean, I know Darius Williams, all the talent is still there for him to do that and be that player. And to tie it all together, they got the glue guys on this secondary. They got Rayshon Jenkins, the do-it-all. We just keep going back to Philly. I mean, he's a Malcolm Jenkins. That's why they have the same last name, you know?
Well, you know, even the Doug Peterson connection, like, I think that these teams play in similar ways too.
And it's Rayshon Jenkins. He does so much of the same stuff that you would ask a Malcolm Jenkins-like player to do. He does run support for them. He's great over the top. He can line up in the nickel and take away your slot. I mean, man, Rayshon Jenkins is a hell of a player, and he's developing exactly how they anticipated he would. And I think you're going to see a breakout performance. We haven't seen the best of Rayshon Jenkins yet. Even Andre Sisco, he's a guy that doesn't get mentioned a whole lot, but he's another dude, very rangy, free safety that can take the ball away as well. I mean, this defense is built to attack you, make you uncomfortable, make you make mistakes, and they have a secondary to capitalize on that. And that's what you want.
Yeah.
Right?
Especially, you know, if they're able to convert those into turnovers, and it's going to become very quickly, I think, if you give the Jags the ball back, it's going to be bad news, especially if that defense is able to force turnovers in, you know, critical situations, you know, right before the half even, or, you know, getting to the end of the game. I think getting the ball back in Trevor Lawrence's hands and into that into that offense again is going to be a real problem. So I completely agree.
Right, and that's exactly where the question marks come in, is with the front seven. It's not like you have like a whole lot of empty space here. They have guys. It's just that I'm not overly sold on some of the defensive starters on the interior. Devin Lloyd, special player.
Yes.
Just, man, I could not believe he fell as far as he did that year. The Jags are making us pay for that decision to not take him, the whole league. And that's where I know we were a little hard on Trent Baalke early on, but he does get these occasional, like I said, when you pick chalk, you end up with guys like Devin Lloyd at the back end of the first round, and they become mainstays on your defense and
absolutely
key contributors. And that's what I expect out of Devin Lloyd. I think he's going to be excellent, continue to be excellent, a total tackle machine, but underrated speed, underrated pass coverage ability from him as well. Josh
Which is
Allen
important in that 3-4.
Exactly right, and he's going to be out there with only one other pure coverage backer. They like to send their guys off the end. Again, this is an attacking scheme defensively. So that's really, and that right there is where the question marks for me on defense start. I'll lend it to you after this, but Josh Allen has not developed the way they would have hoped for him to develop, kind of their speed rush guy. Just hasn't had the right kind of production. There was trade talks buzzing about him for a while, and it may seem like he's not going to return to the team after his contract comes up if he doesn't get traded anyway. And they had a similar selection a year ago, or 2 years ago, I think, with it was 2 years ago, with K'Lavon Chaisson. Somewhat similar skill set to Josh Allen, just more of a tweener. Yeah, so K'Lavon Chaisson, he's a guy with a skill set very similar. Again, that we're going back to the Philly connection with Hassan Reddick. You know, he's even more of a tweener than Josh Allen, maybe a little less power, but so fast, so explosive off the line. Another guy that hasn't turned into the Hassan Reddick type for them. And maybe Peterson will be able to get that out of him eventually, but it's trending in the same direction that Josh Allen was trending, which is really unfortunate because they spent some high first rounders on these guys. They were expecting big things out of these guys. And the only thing to say is thank goodness they ended up with Trayvon Walker because they're going to need him now. He's the big body that kind of plays a different style and is going to give them proven production, but they better be hoping that these guys step up because they're going to need it.
Yes.
Yeah,
agreed. That's exactly my point that I was about to make. They're good in the run game. I think they're good at stopping the run. But they were ranked 24th in yards per game and 28th in pass defense, recording only 35 sacks on the year last year, which in the AFC, that's just not going to cut it. That's not going to be a recipe for success for your front seven, moving forward in this incredibly explosive conference. But they're decent in the run game. But again, like the D line, I think edge specifically, it needs work. Corner, I couldn't agree more. I think they have a lot of talent there in the secondary. But just to your point, they just are not getting enough pressure on quarterbacks, and they're not forcing enough mistakes to where you can actually take advantage of that secondary to punish those mistakes. If you leave a lot of time, then it's just going to leave less time for people to make mistakes.
Yeah, they need to get consistent pressure in order to get those guys into positions where they can take the ball away. At the end of the day, I do liken this to a bit of like the sort of Seattle methodology that they're trying right now, where they want to get the pass rush done and the D-line done through a rotational basis and never have really a standout guy. Outside of Trayvon Walker, I think that's the guy they hope becomes the superstar. And I could see an avenue to that working, some rotation of Josh Allen, Chase on, Ventrell Miller can do a little bit of pass rush stuff, and we talked earlier about Yasir Abdullah. This is another tweener guy that can create pressure but also can cover. So you may see a bit of weird hybrid looks coming out of this defense where they're dropping would-be pass rushers into coverage to confuse quarterbacks and just do things to take quarterbacks out of their element and hopefully confuse them to the point where they do make mistakes and give the ball away to this dominant secondary, or what trends to be a very dominant secondary to me. A couple of guys to mention. I didn't mention Oluokun. Oluokun has been a mainstay for them for a little while, like the last 2 years. Or maybe he's just had a year, but all I know is he was great alongside Lloyd last season. And they have really good depth at that position. It's kind of funny because it's like the last place they need it, considering the strength of those starters. But Chad Muma was a guy I was pretty high on coming out. And he hasn't really taken control of a starting job, but I know they rotate him quite a bit to do the coverage backer stuff. And we talked a little bit about Ventrell Miller is going to be their Swiss Army knife guy. They've got good depth at a lot of these positions. Parting thoughts for me would be they're a little squishy on the interior, but this is, again, the mold of what they like to do. They like to rotate guys. They like to do it by the group effort on the front seven as opposed to where the secondary is carrying all this star power. And I wouldn't bet against Peterson getting it done. I mean, he's done this plenty of times.
Agreed.
I know we likened Chase on and Allen's skill set to like Philly tweener rushers, but we have to remember guys like Hassan Reddick weren't even on the Philly roster when Peterson coached, and Peterson
Right.
is very much an old school big body type of guy on the D line. So he can do both, he can coach both, but I think they're slowly but surely transitioning the roster to a place where Peterson feels comfortable with the skill sets of these guys on the D line. And Trayvon Walker was a big part of that. Trayvon Walker is just a huge football playing type of guy. And like that's the kind of guys that Peterson
100%.
likes. He had Graham, he had Fletcher Cox. He loves those big, massive, dominant D linemen, and they're working toward finding those guys slowly but surely.
Couldn't agree more.
I think it's a pretty logical point. We made our peace with this division, good or bad. There's a lot of fun things to talk about. There was some things we were a bit low on, but it's a good point to transition. We got to make our division winner predictions here, and I wouldn't be surprised if we share a viewpoint on this. So why don't you take it over?
I think it's to nobody's surprise here that I am taking the Jags. To me, it's not close. What the hot take?
My stars!
The hot take. Clutch your pearls, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, the Jags are taking this division. It's not even close. However, I do want to say that, looking forward into the future, that's something that we really want to focus on in this podcast. And I think that there are some really exciting things that are happening in some of these other AFC South teams that, your fan bases can be excited about. But, as of right now, I think the next 2 or 3 years at least, and if Lawrence continues to play at this level and gets that contract extension that we're looking at, it's going to be tough. They're going to be a tough team to beat, especially as long as Doug Peterson's at the helm. And not only that, but I think that they should have ended Brandon Staley's career in that playoff game when they managed to come back and make the adjustments they needed to win.
You'll have to wait for the AFC West breakdown for that one, folks.
Yeah. To me, it's the Jags. It's not even close. But if you are a Colts or a Texans fan, to me, there's a lot to be excited about there. And even in Tennessee, I think that there's, even though we had a lot of question marks about that team, I think that as long as Mike Vrabel is there, that you can be excited about the culture that they're building, and that something will happen as long as Mike Vrabel is there. But yeah, to me, it's the Jags, not even close. I'm not surprised that they're the only team in that division to make the playoffs. I think it's going to be hard for any of those other teams to even fight for the wild card spot.
Yeah. And I mean, closing thoughts, I know I was being a bit of a spoiler. I'm taking the Jags as well, but I will say this, as low and as hard as I was on the Titans, I think from a talent standpoint, they are pretty close to the Jaguars if they could just get their wide receiver core figured out. And I wouldn't rule out a potential trade down the line here, because I can't possibly believe that the Titans are going into this season thinking they're going to make any kind of noise in this division with that wide receiver core. So maybe a guy like Hopkins could get moved to the Titans down the line, or someone else, but having the GM coming in, he's going to want to correct that mistake of getting rid of Brown. And all in all, I could see the Titans defensively holding their own in this division, grinding their way to an 8-win season. But somewhere down the line, maybe they do make a desperation move to shore up the wide receiver core. Because at the end of the day, if they get a legit X guy, or, like even a high-end number 2, Treylon Burks becomes your de facto low-end number 1 or high-end number 2, regardless of who that addition is. And with Kyle Phillips in the slot, we're thinking a lot differently about this Titans wide receiver core. But at the end of the day, do I think they do it? No. Do I think they keep themselves in it? Yes. At the end of the day, I just think even with the loss of Jawan Taylor on the line, I think the Jaguars are going to find a way to keep Trevor Lawrence reasonably protected, and he's going to have a pretty productive year through the air. Maybe not to the same breakout level that you seem to think possible, just based on the protection issues. They will be real. But at the end of the day, maybe that offsets a bit if this defense can take the ball away and give this offense a lot more opportunities. So regardless of how that rolls and just how good they do become, I am confident in saying they're going to be taking this division. It's been a good talk today. It was really, really fun getting to talk about the rookie quarterbacks coming in.
Yeah, a very fun division to talk about, for sure.
Mm-hmm. A lot of young talent. I can't wait for next season, the next episode next week. The way we do these breakdowns is we're going north, south, east, and west. So next week will
AFC East, baby.
AFC East. This is talk about fun divisions to talk about.
Yep.
We're going to have a lot of research to do, too, because there was a whole lot of movement in that division.
Yep.
Any closing thoughts from you, Ryan?
Nothing from me. Titans fans, hang in there.
Titans fans, give us a chance, all right? We have to be honest, but we love you. We want you to stay around. We're going to be right there with you when you're good.
Exactly. But parting thoughts, Godspeed and be well, everybody, and we will see you next week.
That's right. Rumbler Nation, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next week.